I'm going to be discussing Hashimoto's lab testing with Dr. Erin Ellis this evening. And she's going to be explaining what you should be looking for testing and what you don't need to worry about, and hopefully answering some questions if anyone has any questions at the end. Um, so, a little bit of a brief history with myself and testing. I really struggled to get the testing I needed for my Hashimoto's when I was first diagnosed. It was quite common that I was just being tested for TSH and T4, and I was really struggling with my symptoms. And it wasn't until I did a lot of research and reading and kind of insisted on the tests that I needed that we were able to change my medication and get rid of a lot of my symptoms. And I know Erin has had a lot of her own health problems. She's battled lymphoma, and that's what kind of drove her on to be a functional doctor. She also has hypothyroidism and has recently had antibodies for Hashimoto's come back. So she's got a wealth of experience. So I'll hand you over to Dr. Erin Ellis and let her explain a little more about the testing.
Yeah, well, thank you, Helen, for having me. I am in Arizona, so I'm in the U.S. and it's still morning here. So it's interesting for you to say this evening. So I was like, oh, it's 9:30 in the morning here. But this is awesome that we're able to do this because the power of technology and social media. So thank you again for having me. I know there's a lot of, I guess, speculation when it comes to testing for the thyroid, actually testing for anything really. And as a naturopathic physician in the functional medicine world, like I take pride in really getting, like I'm very nosy. So I have to look at all aspects of the body. And to do that, like we look at literally like a lot of lab values, very, very comprehensive testing to get that, right diagnosis. And the thyroid is so very important for a lot of things in our body. Like literally it has a role in almost every organ system in the body. So if someone is suspecting that they may have a thyroid condition, like we have to get a comprehensive set of labs because there's a lot of things that go on with the thyroid. If we only test one thing or two different labs, one or two labs with it, we're not going to really get a clear picture. And that's what I see a lot in my office. It's unfortunate. I have patients come in all the time with, thyroid symptoms, book classic symptoms. And they tell me that their doctor has told them that their thyroid, like everything's normal. Very, very, very common words I hear is you're normal. Well, we have this range on your lab value from 0 to 5 or 0.5 or whatever to 5, usually is the typical lab value here in the US for the major labs for the thyroid or for the TSH really. Most medical doctors will only run a TSH and maybe a T4 if you're lucky. They don't look at antibodies. They don't look at the active form of the thyroid. And that to me, like, isn't a real clear picture because the way the thyroid works is our brain tells our pituitary, which is also in our brain, to make what's called thyroid stimulating hormone. And that is actually what stimulates the thyroid to produce hormone. The first hormone it's going to produce is T4, which is called thyroxine. And that's, it's named this because it contains 4 iodine atoms on it. And then T4 is then converted into T3 by the removal of one of those iodine atoms. And the amount of T4 in the body is really controlled by TSH. So what's being pumped out by our pituitary gland. And the amount of TSH produced is controlled by the amount of T4, in the amount of T4 the brain sets in the body or sees in the body. So if it doesn't see enough, it's going to send the signal back up to the brain to make more TSH, and then it produces the T4. But what's important to note is T4 is converted into that T3. And the free T3 is our active form of thyroid running around through our body. So the T3 plays a giant role in the thyroid health, and that's very, very much under tested. And I can see an optimal T4 level, give or take, but I see a very, very sluggish T3, and T3 is the active form. So to not run the T3 doesn't really make sense in my mind because that's like one of the common medications in the natural desiccated thyroid, like nature thyroid, WP thyroid, MP thyroid, and Armour thyroid. Those are like the 4 common natural thyroid, and it's the liothyronine or the cytomel that you're given synthetic. So most medical doctors will only prescribe a T4, the levothyroxine, but they're not accounting for that T3. And if that T3 is low, like we need some support on the bottom end, because we're either burning through, the thyroid because of stress on the body, whatever the case may be, or we're having improper conversion between T4 and T3. Because in addition to just the thyroid labs, like we need essential nutrients in the body for that proper conversion, like iodine, vitamin D, B vitamins, selenium, zinc. These are all important cofactors for that conversion. So sometimes I see a good conversion. I see a higher TSH. We're still running through, circling through the body. And I'm like, why is this going on? Like the thyroid is stressed. Why is it stressed? Well, we might have an autoimmune component, and that's where the antibodies come into play for Hashimoto's or even Graves' disease. So there's 3 different antibodies the body can produce against its own thyroid. So we have TPO or thyroid peroxide antibody, or TG or thyroglobulin antibody. Those are the 2 that are most commonly elevated, one or both, in the autoimmune condition Hashimoto's, which is most common. And I very, very, very rarely run TPI, or TSI, I'm sorry, that's the one that's elevated in hyperthyroid or Graves' disease, which is less common than hypo or underactive thyroid. So if medical doctors typically see a TSH on the elevated range, now remember, their range is 0 to 5. And if it's not flagged, like they're really not going to look closely at it. But naturopathic medicine, functional medicine doctors, like I look at it like, is that optimal? Because if I see a TSH of 2, even 3, I'm like, what's going on here? And then I look at T4 and I look at T3 and the antibodies to see if there's something going on, a sluggish thyroid. Because that's not optimal. Like people honestly feel good with the TSH around 1. So if it's anything higher, 1.8, 1.5, give or take, it's going. There's obviously some other things going on in the body that I have to address. That's why, naturopathic medicine, we look at the body as a whole. So thyroid plays a role in our endocrine, it's a huge endocrine system role, but that's also including our cortisol, our adrenals, our sex hormones, our gut. Like it plays a giant role in everything. So anyways, back to the antibodies, like we might have a antibody response. And that when I say antibody response, I mean an elevation of those antibodies, but still a normal operating thyroid. And I actually have seen that in my practice. And she had, thyroid symptom after thyroid symptom, but her TSH was optimal. It was like 0.8. Her T4 and her T3 were great, but her antibodies are like 1500. I'm like, whoa, like we caught this crazy early because her body's listening in response, but it hasn't yet, had any destruction on her thyroid. So hopefully we can get this under control before I have to put her on any, thyroid medicine, because right now she doesn't really need it. We just have to control the inflammation in the body, try and get these antibodies down, etc. So that's really like the testing. One other thing too with the T3 is that we might shunt over to what's called reverse T3. And reverse T3 is essentially the inactive form of T3. So I see this a lot. Like I saw it yesterday, actually. I had a really high reverse T3. And I said, well, we need to work on conversion, obviously. And then also, like if we shunt over to this inactive form of T3, it's likely due to stress, toxins, inflammation, other autoimmune conditions, the deficiency of cofactors, leaky gut, common things that we see, or I see medically almost daily. So I have to work on that first, because I'm like, your thyroid is good, but it could be better because you're shunting into this inactive form of thyroid. So that's the testing in a nutshell. So I really only run like TSH, total T4, total T3, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, and your antibodies. There's like T4, there's some uptakes, there's T7, there's a lot. And I don't really think that those, like for someone that's just, starting off in their healthcare journey, and I'm not an endocrinologist, don't claim to be an endocrinologist, that's, up to them. Like I don't run any of that because I don't really feel like it's super relevant. But I do see patients come in with those labs, and I'm like, but what's your free T3? Like, I don't even have that. Where's your antibodies? Like, I don't even have that. How do I even know your thyroid's working right? Like, why are they running these labs? They don't really pertain to actual overall function of that mechanism of the brain to the pituitary, TSH to the thyroid hormone. So every doctor is different. This is just what I see and what clinically works and is effective in my practice.
That's great. Thanks so much. That's
Yeah.
pretty much what I kind of ask for on my testing, is kind of what you've mentioned there. So that's great.
Yeah.
I think we have a question here from Kim, I think it is, and she's asking, should she be taking those supplements alongside her thyroxine medication? I think she might be referring to
the
iodine.
cofactors, I think, the selenium. Well, so iodine is very, 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 very important for the thyroid. As you know, thyroxine and is for, composed for iodine. So most people with hypothyroid or a suboptimal thyroid are deficient in iodine, but you might not be. But what the problem is if you don't know your iodine levels and you start supplementing with iodine, you might flip the switch and get too much iodine and have a reverse effect on your thyroid, which we don't want. So I never ever recommend just taking supplements because you read about it. I would get your body checked and make sure that you are deficient. Like I said, most people in my practice are deficient, but iodine is something that we don't want too much of. Same with like vitamin D. Like vitamin D is crucial for all of our hormones, but it's a fat soluble vitamin. So another one, most people are very deficient in vitamin D, but how deficient are you and how much do you need? And it's something that needs to be monitored by a physician because we don't want too much of it. So the other ones like selenium and zinc, I mean, those are, it depends. Again, you don't really need to take something unless your body needs it. And that's where functional medicine comes into play, and naturopathic medicine, because I only give your body what your body needs. It's not something that, I'm just like, hey, take this. I read it off the internet because it looks good. So I would get tested first.
That's great. Thank you. It's great advice.
Hope that answered your question, Kim.
I think it probably did. I think it was very comprehensive.
Excuse me.
Let me just see. I've got one question here from one of my followers who couldn't join us live. And she was asking how long should she leave between taking her medication and having her labs tested?
Oh, okay. So there's two sides to this. So I sometimes recommend patients take their thyroid medicine the morning of the blood draw because I want to see how they're absorbing it. Because if we have malabsorption issues or leaky gut or increased intestinal permeability, we might have an issue with absorption of the thyroid medicine. So that's the benefit to taking it before your lab draw. But other practitioners don't want you to take it. They just say skip it that morning or take it after. But it's best to take it 30 minutes away from food or beverage. That's another big one that's, it's explained, but I don't know if people really understand it. It's not that it's bad if you take your medicine before, like 20 minutes before you eat or have some coffee. Like you're not supposed to have any coffee or any beverage besides water for 30, 45 minutes, even an hour if you can. And that's for the absorption. You're just not going to fully absorb it as well. So you might not get the full dose if you wait longer you want to take it on an empty stomach. Some practitioners do a split dose. So the afternoon dose is a little bit trickier because you have lunch, like you're not coming off that fasted state from sleeping. So, it's a little bit tricky. I just tell people to set an alarm or have it, next to their desk if they're working and they know like, okay, after an hour of me eating lunch, then I can take my afternoon thyroid medicine. So.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think all the other questions I had, you've already answered in
your,
so that's great.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time to kind of join us and explain all that. That's amazing.
Yeah, I love testing. Like lab values are so fun because not everyone's different, and that's what is really awesome about my job is that not every patient is the same. And I have seen thyroid labs like what's going on, like your T4, your T3 is good, but your TSH is high. I'm like, why is this happening? So it's more so than really then I look at other things, like what is stressing the thyroid? Like, why is it, like, you obviously you're converting well, you're producing well, but you're just burning through it. So it's like constant, this constant cycle of, producing the TSH to stimulate the thyroid. So then we have to look at other things, like what's going on. Is it stress? Is it your hormones out of balance? Is it your adrenals? Like, we have the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary axis, that controls most of our endocrine system. So we look at that, and that's why it's, you can't. I highly recommend, if you have functional medicine doctor, integrative doctor, naturopathic doctor in your community, to really seek care with them, because we look at the whole person, and that's why it's so important. I see, adrenal fatigue along with thyroid. I see, gut permeability with the thyroid. Like, everything plays a role in thyroid health, because, like I said in the beginning, it has an effect on almost every organ system in the body, and it's tiny. Like, this guy gets beat up a lot, and we need to be nice to him. He controls a lot. So it's a very, very important gland, and thyroid disease is so common. And it's, it can really, really make people really sick and not feel well. But when you actually get the diagnosis that something's wrong with your thyroid, or find the right doctor that will tell you that your thyroid is sluggish, like, it makes all the difference in the world when you start, the therapies to help it. Then you're like, oh my gosh, it's like night and day. Like, oh, I never realized that I was this tired, or my hair's falling out, or, I'm freezing all the time. So, yeah.
Yeah, it certainly is true. I didn't start to really recover until I addressed the whole picture and worked with, I think we call it over here, nutritional therapist, rather than a functional doctor, but it's kind of the same.
Okay.
The same idea. So.
Yeah. It's fun. So just get testing, and if there's a lot of testing, you can order online yourself. There's a website, and I was looking this up for another. Oh shoot, what's it called? I don't have it up on my screen, but you can self-order a lot of tests nowadays. I don't know what it's like on the other side of the pond, but here in the US, you can self-order. You might, consider obviously having a doctor read it. Paloma Health is another good one. If you don't really want to seek care, they have a finger blot. And I'm not sure if they ship outside the US, so I'm not sure, but they have a finger blot. The only downside to that is they don't test the thyroglobulin antibodies, they only test TPO. Okay. And so for me, that was interesting, because my thyroid looked great back in April. And then when I retested it in September, my thyroglobulin antibodies were through the roof. And so I don't know if they were affected back in April, because this test I did, I was just checking it out to see if this would be a good test to recommend to patients, outside of Arizona, where I'm licensed to check their thyroid out. But I wanted to try it on myself first. And I was like, wait, they don't test the other antibodies. So, and look, mine was elevated, and I had no idea until I did an actual blood test and tested for both of them. So it's important.
There definitely are labs. I know in the UK, there's definitely labs that you can order independently on certain websites.
Yeah. So I definitely highly recommend getting it checked, especially after this year. 2020 has played a giant, doozy on everyone's hormones. I see it in the office every single day, and I'm like, wait, you were good in May. What happened? Oh, wait, we had coronavirus. So, I mean, look at my thyroid. My thyroid went in the toilet in the last 6 months. Like, I've seen adrenal fatigue. I've seen cortisol through the roof. I've seen everything go crazy over this year. So if you haven't seen a physician this year for anything, go get, general labs. You don't need to be sick to go to the doctor. Your health is so important. And I hope that's getting clear this year with everything going on, that we really should take our health seriously. And yeah, you don't need to be sick to go to the doctor. You can go there and make sure that everything's in balance. I mean, I've seen so many people that look healthy on the outside, but they're terribly unhealthy on the inside. And the only way that you can, determine that is getting some, routine comprehensive lab work.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, don't wait till you're so sick that it's kind of, it's hard to turn it around.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you so much. That was so informative, and I'm sure.
You are so welcome.
clear a lot of the confusion up. So
I hope so. And if anyone has any questions, I am very active on Instagram, so you can, send me a message, a DM. My website's drerinellis.com, so you can reach out there. You can find my email address, contact my office. But yeah, I would be happy to answer any questions if someone's watching this later and has a question.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
And no problem. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Good night.
Night. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. I didn't know. I'm just going to turn it off myself. Okay, thank you for watching, everybody. I hope that was useful for you, and I'll be putting it up on my feed for anybody who missed it. Bye.